One of these documents is trying, I know some of you are aware of what JPI Climate is, but a number of you others may not know what JPI Climate is. So what we have provided you with is a brochure that sort of explains what JPI Climate is. So that'll give you an idea of what we are and what we're trying to do. And as Patrick has said, is we're essentially a gathering of member states that have common interests in this area of connecting knowledge and climate. So it's a little bit different than a lot of people think it is. So I recommend you take a look at this. The other thing that you have is this document, which is the strategic research agenda that the JPI Climate has. It's a summary. The strategic research agenda that we have is 81 pages long. And I do recommend it if you want to read it. But this was an idea of putting some of it together. And one of the things that we're doing, and you will hear more about tomorrow, I'll mention it to you, is that we've decided that it's been 5 years. Sorry. It's been 5 years. Sorry. It's been 5 years, and so we want to now update this. And we've got a process underway, which we're going to be doing that, and hopefully provide an opportunity for not just the research community, but all the people that are involved in JPI to get involved in. So I recommend you take a look at these documents, and that'll be helpful for you. As was mentioned, is now we're trying to get a different idea of the roles that different people play and the perspectives that people have in looking at climate services. So we've pulled together 4 talks for you. And the idea of having these talks is to start you thinking about how you may want to test your thinking and test your thoughts, and maybe come up with some ideas about how we could develop research and innovation ideas that are going to address these different people's needs. So we thought we'd start out by looking at it a user's perspective. And for that, we've asked, and I'm very pleased to have Stefan Werner from the city of Copenhagen. He's going to come and talk to us now. Stefan?
Yeah, welcome, and I'm happy to talk to you. I made a presentation for you, which should last like 15 minutes. I hope I can keep it. When I was asked to do this, I work in the team for climate adaptation in Copenhagen. We are like 14 people working full-time only with climate adaptation in the city, which has around about 500,000 inhabitants. So, and this is the picture you can see from last summer. And this is normally a road, it's not like a harbor. So, but I will come closer to this. I had to ask my colleagues how everything started, and they said to me, yeah, I was like this guy, which actually one of my colleagues, he had the idea to make a climate adaptation plan, and he has a face, and his name is Jan Rasmussen. And yeah, he started to call a consultant called Kobe and said, we want to know something about climate adaptation, what is the consequences for the city of Copenhagen. And they called to somebody who's called the Danish Meteorological Institute, DMI, and they downscaled the IPCC report to something which we can cope with in the region of Copenhagen. And I have this report here, it's like this big, it has like 12 pages. So you can see this is where we can base our work on. So then the end was like this, we had this COP15 in Copenhagen, and they want to make a climate plan, and they said, okay, we have to do something about climate adaptation as well, and then it was kind of too big, and this was getting their own report, so this is kind of the story in the back. So what did I do? Just very shortly, maybe most of you know this, maybe not, I don't know, I didn't know it. The IPCC model is like a model which has a grid about 100 times 100 kilometers, and DMI, they downscaled it to a grid which was smaller. And in Copenhagen is smaller than 1/7 of the grid. And they use some models, some from England, some from Germany. I don't know if the numbers are correct, but you can find this out later. What does it mean? I make this picture. I said, okay, when you take this, I can use this one maybe here. See which button is it? Is it the? Yeah, here. This is the grid. This is the grid from the IPCC, and this is Copenhagen. And I couldn't see it, so Copenhagen is 1% of a cell of a grid of the EPCC. So I put it up, this big one over here, and you can see that the downscaling process means that you take one cell of the IPCC model, and then you make a new cell out of it, and then one cell of it is the size of Copenhagen. And this is where we base our knowledge on. So what does it mean for us? We identified three main challenges. We say it will rain differently, mostly more in patterns which we don't like, because it's raining more in the winter and less in the summer. And when it's raining in the summer, it's raining more intensively. We have even, because it's raining less in the summer, problem is the heat in the summer, and then it's getting more warmer. Like today, it's very nice and warm. And we have the rising sea level, which will give us some problems when we have some storm surges. And we said when we have this climate adaptation plan, we have to make some revisions of this, because we get a new EPCC report every 5 years. So then we make some nice maps and showing people what's happening. On the left side, you can see what's happening when heavy rain is coming over the city. On the right side, you can see what's happening when the sea level is rising. So this is partly some flooding, so we don't like this. Most people don't like water in the basements. So when we make some risk maps, which you probably knew as well, you calculate the possibility that an event will happening with the damage costs. And this is only not on the map because it's another part, not inside of Copenhagen, but normally they have a lot of floodings as well. So, and the left map shows the flooding risk from rain, and the right one from rising sea level. And we make some risk calculations as well. The red line shows the costs for damages for changing rain patterns, and the blue one is for the rising sea level. And you can see that after around about 50 years, the problems with rising sea level is getting bigger. So we start with the problem with rain, because we think when we have solved this problem, then we can look at the rising sea level. Of course, we have looked at the urban heat islands as well, and I don't want to go further on this, because we ask ourselves, can we make a reality check? So, do we know if those data are good enough for us? So, I started for like 4 years ago in the city of Copenhagen, and the day after I started, it looks like this. It was like pouring down in Copenhagen, and this was not only happening one time, it's like 4 events where we had the rain coming down, which was probably only coming down 100 years. So the city was flooded. So we could see, okay, on page 33 on our climate adaptation plan, what's happening. When it's raining quite a lot, the city is flooded. Yes, it is flooded. It's flooded in those places. It is, and it costs a lot of money. The first event on the 2nd of July cost us around about 800 million euros. So in December 2013, we had kind of a storm surge, and we were like 10 centimeters from a tipping point that the whole city or nearby city would be flooded. And if you just calculate the 60 centimeters of sea level rising, which the EPCC report is talking about around about Denmark, then we had a problem. So we could say check on this one as well. And last summer it was quite warm in Copenhagen. This is some data which should show this, that we had like around about 2 to 3 weeks where we had temperatures around about 30 degrees and no rain, which is kind of unusual for Copenhagen, I can tell you this. It's much more warmer here than in Copenhagen now. So what did we do after that? We talked to our politicians, or I should maybe say that while we had this climate adaptation plan, we had to show them to our politicians, and they had to approve this plan. And while we were doing this was happening. So it was very good. So there were no discussions. You know, they came in the autumn. They came to us and said, "Okay, you want to have 2.5 million crowns for your work? You get 50." And last last summer, when we had to discuss the budget for this year again, this was happening again. So they said, okay, you get your money. We do this. So what did we do with all the money? We looked at Copenhagen and we made a big investigation. What's happening in Copenhagen when it's raining? How should we solve this problem? In Copenhagen, we have the idea to not to build bigger pipes, but some pipes, and the rest we want to handle on the surface with green and blue solutions. So we made divided the city in 7 surface catchments, called to 7 consultancies, and said, do the work, you have 2 months. So they had to get busy. And it resulted in a kind of a big cloudburst management plan, which is shown here. The big blue stripes showing where the water is going in an event of a 100-year event, which is what we calculate is the best solution to secure the city. So, and to give you a picture, this is what we came up to. We identified 300 projects on the surface, which think will take around about 20 years to do it, and will cost around about 1 billion euros to do it. And this is only for the infrastructure to manage the water. Then everything which is nice part on the top of the surface, green biodiversity and stuff like this, is not included in this. And our politicians have to approve this this year. Then we thought, okay, what do we want to do on the surface? How should the green look like? So we took the 7 catchment areas and said, okay, now we look on it and say, what is the green? How could a green structure look like? How can we put biodiversity into it? How can we connect people together, talking about mobility? And we came up with I call it the green vision, a green integrated network, which is related to the 300 cloudburst projects and should be a part of the green infrastructure, which should combine all the added values and effects we like to have, like nature and biodiversity, health, environment, clean air, cooling, urban heat island, I talked about it, mobility, accessibility. So then we talked about sea level rising. We said, okay, we could, on the left you can see how the city will be flooded when we don't do anything. So we thought about maybe just put a barrier on both sides of the harbor and let the water stand outside, because we like to be in the city, we like to have an attractive city, and we don't have we don't have one big walls in the city which should protect the harbor water from coming into the old city. So this is kind of an illustration where we want to build kind of a barrier, and maybe have some ports where you can come in and out. So then we have to talk about, okay, how much do we want to protect? Like the small circle is just the city of Copenhagen, or the bigger circle, then we talk about the neighbor communities, or the big circle, so we make a protection area system for all of it. This is something which we have to talk about, and we're working on this. We want to make a design competition in the next year to find out what to do next. So, where are we right now? We have, I told about this 12 pages in the beginning. Now when we look about our cloudburst management plan, we have 2,500 pages still growing, which we have to deliver to our politicians to give us a thumb up to do all the stuff. We have the 300 projects. We expect to start up 15 projects every year. We started this year, and you can count that it's kind of a lot of money we're pushing into the city. A lot of construction work will happening there. Then we have to talk about financing. We have a business case where we say, okay, when it's raining quite a lot, we have to get some damages costs, and if you make some construction, the costs are cheaper than the damages. So this is good. But then we want to invest the money in something which we like to have. We want to make an attractive city. So, and if we want to have a greener city, we have to show how can we make it greener? Where's the business case? And we are not very good in this. We are doing the best, but we can do better. Maybe you can do better as well. So this is always a question, which kind of business case do we want to have? So what did we learn? We learned political backup is necessary. It helps with a big cloudburst event. We changed legislation because it didn't fit. We had to make a financing model where we could use our water fees to pay solutions on the surface, which was not possible before. We learned that we have a long implementation time, with 20 years, so we need some solutions which are adaptable. Because already now, like 3 years after we made the first plane, there coming a new information about that the rain patterns maybe will change a little bit differently anyway. So the rain will increasing with 10% more. So we have to recalculate everything what we've done. And we think when we make solutions on the surface, they are more flexible than a pipe which is dig down in 10 meters under the ground, because it's expensive to make it bigger. Then I thought about the work you were talking about doing here, and we say we don't need a new report every year, because we have an implementation time about 20 years. So what we need are solutions which are flexible, and then we have to see how is the climate changing, where is it going to. We know that the existing administration is challenged, and that it's difficult to implement it, because we come with a new knowledge, and then somebody said, "You're not the guy who should tell me how to do. I'm an architect. I'm a city planner. I know what to do." We said, "Yeah, but you can learn something," and then we have a lot of discussions. I talked about business models, and we had the other day a discussion about our sewage company, which is responsible for the piping, and they said, "Yeah, we can just make more holes in the pipes than all the water is going to the harbor." We said, "Yeah, but we have a combined system in our city, so it's not so nice to get all this shit into the harbor." I said, "Yeah, but it's cheaper." And I said, "It's only cheaper because you don't have to pay anything for it. So it's just like CO2, you don't have to pay something to get it out." So we have to get kind of a business model, or maybe some other things to push things in the direction we want to have. Because I can definitely understand it's cheaper for a sewage company to puncture some pipes and say, "Okay, we put it just into the harbor." But it's not the way we want to do it. In Copenhagen, we like to go, we have actually a harbor bath, so you can swim in the harbor, so it's very nice. We want to continue with this. And I don't think it's a good idea to mix all the like sewage together with rainwater, which is not contained. So we have to talk about this. In 100 years, we want to have something else, probably. So, and we learned that the new alternative solutions should benefit the whole city, and this is what our politicians want. So we have to work on this and always say, "Okay, this is the benefits." And then you talk about how much is a green roof benefiting you. So, okay, well, we have to think about this. Maybe you can help. So next step, all the knowledge that we and my colleagues have collected, we have to put it into the organization so they understand what we are talking about. Things changing very quickly, so we have to quickly to tell them how to do it. Implementation is important. Okay, 300 projects, 1 billion euros. Something kind of work we have to do. Networking is very important to tell people what we are going to. Partnership with the private sector, we're working on this as well. I have tomorrow a meeting about the Horizon 2020 project, so I'm very looking forward to it. And we have to learn from our front-runner cases, and maybe keep an eye on the rising sea level. I heard that the people from Holland are very interested in this. And I thank you for your attention.
Stefan, thank you very much. I hope you saw some of the things that I think that I got out of this, anyways, this presentation, and thinking about it in the context one of the types of information that you need is at the scales that are needed and how that challenges us. It's not just climate information you needed other types of information at those scales I thought were very interesting. Another thing that I thought that was interesting is reducing impacts alone is insufficient to support decision making. I think that's one thing I heard very much, and that challenges us in terms of the types of information that is needed to address those positive implications. I thought that was a very, very solid message, and the desire to work in partnership. Is there a question for Stefan? Yes, please. Oh, sorry. Where's the microphone? I've lost it.
Is it okay without microphone?
No, I think they really need it because they're recording it, so I apologize.
Okay.
Just identify quickly who you are.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm Bolin from the Swedish Geotechnical Institute. I wonder, what is the legal status of the implementation or adaptation plan in relation to detailed plans that are made all over the city? Is it steering in some way, and how is it steering?
The climate adaptation plan is going to be a part of the city plan, which is our highest instrument we have. And we are including all the information from the climate adaptation plan and the cloudburst plan into our sewage plan, which is another tool for us to where we can decide what we want to do. So it's the plan for itself is not so important, but because we linked it to the other plans, the city plan, which allows us to change things. Is it understandable?
Yes.
Maybe we can do it in the coffee break.
Yeah.
Yes. I will come back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, there's another one over there.
One more quick question, if we could. Right behind you. Just pass that back. Great. Sorry about that.
You talked about business models and the fact that this is something that really needs solved. You couldn't give us a bit more on that? What are the particular issues you're dealing with, and what kind of response are you getting?
Yeah, it's like we have now a business case where we say that piping is cheaper than making solutions on the surface when you not compare it when you want to transport water over there. So, and it's very cheap for a sewage company to say, okay, we just put all the water into a park, it's big enough, and then we make a small wall around it. And we say, okay, but we want to have, we would like to separate the water and have like a separate system. And it's very difficult to do this when you don't have a driver, which because everybody can say kind of out of the business model we have right now, okay, this part is not cheaper, so we have really to find the benefits, what's the added value of the blue and green infrastructure we want to plan. And I worked on a different European work project, ACFAED, where we talked about this, but the business model, the financing in it is always difficult. And maybe it's just that we say, okay, it costs a little bit more. So, but it could be interesting to see how can we do this. Green roofs is a good example as well. Investors always say green roof is expensive. I don't need it. And then you have to explain it.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Stefan, you're here the rest of the day, aren't you?
Yes.
Because I did hear you say you had something you were doing tomorrow.
Yeah, I have to leave tomorrow morning.
Okay, so he's here today, so take the chance to talk to Stefan, and that may help in terms of some of your thinking, because I thought there was a lot of richness in what Stefan had to say. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you. The next talk we have is climate services as a public good. And it's really looking at climate services as that public good. And we have Inger Hansen Bauer from the Norwegian Center for Climate Services and Norwegian Meteorological Institute. I'm a little slow here, just bear with me, Inger.
Thank you for inviting me to answer this question from my point of view.
Do you see your presentation
Oops,
there?
it's,
Sorry.
yeah, that's one.
A little slow.
Yeah, there we are.
There.
Okay,
Thank you, Inger.
yeah, so I will try to answer it from my point of view. Let's see. This. I'm representing the Norwegian Center for Climate Services, and this is a cooperation between the Norwegian Meteorological Institute, the Norwegian Water Resources and Energy Directorate, and Uni Research, which is or the climate part of Uni Research at the University of Bergen. So we are a virtual center. We are not located at the same place. And in our board, we also have a representative for the Norwegian Environment Agency. So from my point of view, of course, I would say that climate services is or should be a public good. Well, that doesn't mean that it only should be public, but parts of it needs to be public. The purpose for climate services, I would say, is to provide decision makers with information relevant for climate adaptation. Adaptation to the present climate, to the coming climate, to different time scales. But this, in this short message, there is something hidden, because climate or consequences of climate changes work in lots of different ways. We have the greenhouse emissions that directly affects the CO2 concentration in atmosphere and oceans. And then the concentration in the atmosphere leads to global warming, changes of precipitation, wind currents, and so on. But again, these changes affect on the hydrological system, different variables, runoff, risk for floods, droughts, snow conditions. And again, all of these works on the physical nature, erosion, landslides, avalanches, sea level, and all of these effects on terrestrial and aquatic and ocean ecosystems. And again, all of these affects the society. So climate adaptation is not really only adapting to the changing climate, but also to the changes in the whole system. In climate services, I don't include going back to the emissions, but a really different way of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. But I think that a part of when giving advice for climate adaptation, it's also important that we don't really give bad advice concerning adaptation that actually increases the problem. And in climate services, we also, a part of it is also to look at different emission scenarios. But anyway, the purpose of climate services is then not only to provide decision makers with information, but also provide climate impact researchers with relevant climate and climate change information. So this is really a huge task, public or private. Well, both are actually necessary. But the public services have some specific responsibilities. I would say that the main responsibilities for public services is to assist governmental institutions and authorities to disseminate basic climate, including climate change information, freely and available for everyone. And then to produce and document standard tools and procedures, for instance, for calculating design values. First, assist governmental authorities. I then think about the authorities from national to municipality level, but also authorities responsible for like roads and railways, coastal infrastructure, energy, buildings, health, primary and industries, and of course there are lots of different needs in these different among these different authorities, and it's important to go get closely in touch with these authorities to define, together defined the different needs. They may not even always be aware of their own needs. Of course, some of these authorities are very used to relating to design values, such as road and railway authorities. But for other parts of these authorities, they are not actually very used to thinking about climate change. Basic information, freely available for anyone. Well, first for the present climate. Climate observations are in Norway, they are free, and I think that's very good because they forms the basis here, a basis here. Basic analysis of climate statistics is also very important. For instance, this intensity, duration, frequency curves for precipitation. They are form the basic for design values. And we need the present values even to calculate the future values. For the future climate, I think that the synthesized information on relevant climate projections, that is a very important task. Of course, there are lots of different climate projections for different emission scenarios and also for various models. And I think it's very important to show the spread of these different projections. And in Norway, we plan to do this for temperature, precipitation, for different hydrological variables, and also for sea level, for different regions in Norway and different times of year, etc. That will be a good framework for anyone working with scenarios to put them, see where are they compared to other projections. Of course, specific climate projections, and in Norway we post-process the projections which are available in Europe PART2. We also to some degree use statistical downscaling. Advice on how to use climate projections, I think, is also a task, a public task, you could say. These maps shows just it's just an example showing calculations of how the 200-year flood may change to the end of the century. But you need to be educated a bit to use information from that map. And then it's also, I think, the public services responsibility to develop tools for calculating design values, define methods and procedures for instance, for dam security. We are doing that now for the present climate, and we don't necessarily do the calculations ourselves. That could be done by private services, but they need to follow the methods and procedures that are prescribed for that kind of calculations. To define climate factors, I think that that is a task which has to be done in cooperation with the scientific experts, with the authorities, and I think also the Climate Service Center has an important role here, and also for communicating all this information. We need climate factors, for instance, for heavy rainfall, for floodings, for storm surges, And it's important both to look at the historical development and look at the future models to find the best climate factors. So, to sum up, why public services? We should be a focal point for authorities, ensure free access to climate and hydrological data and projections, ensure consistency in calculation of, for instance, design values in space, in time, and between variables, and make a basic framework to put single studies into a context. And as it was said, this framework has to be recalculated every 5 or 6 years or so to take in the new information from IPCC. And I think these will be the main points for public services. But still there are lots of room for private services, tailoring climate data for specific tasks and areas. The public services will always be limited concerning spatial resolution, time resolution, and also the number of variables and combination of different variables. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I thought that was important to try and set this frame, and this is the first part of a dual action, actually, way that we understand what public services are doing, but also private. And both are required to deliver climate services. We feel very strongly about that. Is there a question for Ingrid?
More question for myself. I'm Jeanette Besseman from KLMI. Implicitly, you're saying that there should be national funding, governmental funding for all the things you mentioned. But I think that if I look at the little knowledge I have from different countries, that's not the case everywhere in Europe. So how do you think about that?
Well, I think some of it should be official funding, but for instance, for research, we will have to apply for money as everyone else, and cooperate with the best institutes, so everything can't be financed directly through from the government, but I think parts of it should be financed that way.
I was just going to say, I thought you might want to say something.
Well, it's a question about the observations, the data records that you need to address some applications. For some applications, I'm sure that at maybe a river basin level, you need observations from neighboring countries or statistical analysis from neighboring countries. So how do you ensure that there is consistency across this information?
We have a very good Nordic cooperation for climate services. So it's easy to exchange data. And climate data are now free both in Norway and in Sweden. So
you also use the same methods? The same calibration, bias correction?
We are working that. I can't say that we are doing this, but we are now comparing our methods and looking at the results. So we have started the process of getting or standardizing methods, but we are not there yet.
I think we're going to have to move on. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I'd now like to call John Firth, who's with Acclimatize, who's going to look at the role of the private sector in climate services and try and give us, add to the picture we've just had. And I'm just going
top one. Very top.
Very top.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Roger, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm coming at this, as Roger said, from a slightly different perspective. I think to perhaps explain what I do. just referring back to Patrick's 50 Shades diagram, which it will ever be known as from now on. We're in that sort of middle box in the translation, broker and impact modelling area. And so we sit on the interface between users and the more traditional academic Met Service, climate service world. Acclimatise is a private sector for-profit company. We're a consultancy. We're a digital application company. We build online applications for our clients, and we're a communications company. We only deal with adaptation and resilience, nothing else. Inevitably that crosses boundaries into things like wider sustainability, disaster risk management, things like that. We've operated now in just under 60 countries in the world. We do public and private, we do developed, all over the world, as I say. We do everything from national adaptation planning countries all the way through to corporate risk management, financial services management, helping companies and organisations secure finance for their projects, so all sorts of things. I'm going to just do half a dozen slides or so, but I'm going to pick out a couple of themes, and I think they're themes in the context of where JPI Climate goes, and perhaps our interest in potential collaboration. And one is that one of the themes is that what we see is not necessarily a demand for climate data. What we see is a demand for interpretation and understanding, and that this is that translation box. There are very, very few clients out there, users, either public or private, who actually want climate modelling data. Very, very few. Perhaps some of the water companies, perhaps some of the engineering energy companies, perhaps some who are focused on agriculture, but very, very few. Most of them want to understand what does it mean in the context of the organisation I represent and work on. The second thing I think is that, and it's been mentioned before, that climate data is an input. It's not an output. It's an input into something else. And it's an input that's added to other data, and then analysis is done, and then there's interpretation, and then there are decisions. So it's part of a much bigger supply chain of data and knowledge. And one of the things I'm going to pick up on that as one of the key inputs, and actually we're faced with a challenge now because the pace of climate services and climate data has been so intense, it's actually outstripped the the confidence and the availability of data in other socio-economic sectors. So often we have good climate data, but we don't have good other sectoral data, other thematic data to build it together. So we actually have a problem there. And one of the things I want to talk about is thresholds. Oops. Just to give this a context, and this is an infographic we produced from the 2011 Thailand floods, which had a total economic cost of $45 billion around the world. Remember that. It wasn't just cost to Thailand itself. And what it illustrates here is lots and lots of figures about nearly 10,000 factories forced to close. Total output in Thailand fell by 35%. 6,000 fewer vehicles produced each day by car plants in Thailand. 45% of the world's computer hard drives were lost in terms of production. A number of major US companies reported losses to the extent that it caused shares to drop, and potentially it's going to lose directors' jobs if they have another Thailand flooding instance and they haven't done anything about it to protect their business. Now, what's interesting when you look at these figures, there is no reference to climate change. Right? Now, we know this is a climate change-driven issue, or potentially, but what it's giving is the sort of information and the interpretation that both the government and the private sector operating this country needs to understand. So it's trying to context the information about future climate projections within what does it mean for my supply chain, what does it mean for my production, what does it mean for my clients and customers. And that's this issue of contexting and interpretation. Another example is just changing the subject and picking up on the city's work is we were asked to build a social vulnerability tool to allow city officials, this was 5 cities in the UK, to map vulnerable residents in relation to their exposure to severe weather events, flooding, heat wave, for example, windstorm. And it was a tool that assisted both at strategic planning and emergency response level, so it had these dual purposes. And when we sat down and worked this out with the user, and that's an important part of our work, we design tools with the user. We don't design the tool and then try and sell it to the user. It's designed with the user, so they're a vital part of the design. That when we looked at various users for this tool, it wasn't just the public sector, it was also the private sector, because a lot of the social and healthcare provision in the UK is actually coming from the private sector increasingly, so either direct or outsourced to them. And when we looked at where all the data was coming, yes, there was climate data in here, particularly in terms of driving flood risk and heat wave, but most of the data, the socio-economic data we needed to build this index, was coming from a wide variety of other sources. And just to give that example, when you look at break down the definition of vulnerability into exposure, sensitivity and adaptive capacity, the climate data sits in the exposure box. The real challenge was getting the data for the other 2 boxes, because that's what you need. And until you've got those other 2 boxes filled and you pull it together in some form of tool, the exposure data on its own has little meaning. So, I mean, and what that produced was effectively a GIS planning tool with various overlays. I'm sorry, you probably won't be able to read this. Lots of socio-economic issues. This process can be used for other climate and vulnerability risk issues as well. We've, launched this in 5 UK cities, and we're actually talking to the city of New Orleans next week about developing a similar process for them. They saw us give a presentation about this at the World Bank a couple of weeks ago. Just changing subject now. This is, unfortunately, I can't show you what we've done, right? So we've had to mock this up. Now, we've been working on a major project, a risk screening tool for one of the world's biggest companies, which is an asset company. It's a company that owns large fixed assets that are around for a number of years. And what they wanted was something that enabled them to go in and sort of drill down, not just the site, but drill down to specific assets on that site, like a pump, like a compressor, and start to ask questions about how will that pump or compressor, how will it operate over the next 10, 15, 20 years, the life of that pump, under various climatic conditions. So if ambient air temperature rises, what will the operating performance of the pump be? That's pretty crucial for this organisation, because it makes a decision, it influences the decision on what sort of pump you buy and what are your future operating costs. So we built a tool for them which translated global CNIP5 and Cordex data. We spent a long time working with them, looking at all their assets, working out what their thresholds were, what are their design performance thresholds, at which point they start to fail or performance tails off, because that's what they want to know. Surprisingly, most companies don't have a good handle on this. And it's actually the same for the public sector as well. They'll have some information, but unless they've got really good asset data, they're struggling on this. And what it enables them to do is, at a strategic regional level, they can use default thresholds for all their assets and default confidence levels and compare one region to another. So it means they can start to look at, should I locate a new asset in this region or in another region? And at a technical level, they can drill down to the individual assets themselves and start to understand how those are performing. We think it's pretty exciting. I'd love to show you this, but it's actually commercially sensitive. And I can't even explain who the company is. It's so commercially sensitive because they see this as a competitive advantage. Now, this depends on access to public sourced, freely available, good climate data. But this is actually what the user wants, not the data. And this is summary of thresholds. This came from, which Roger will be familiar with, it came from a report, Climate Adaptation Risk and Certain Decision Making, which UKCIP produced, and my fellow director at Acclimatise, Richenda Connell, is one of the authors. And I always think it's the most important diagram I've ever seen about trying to explain what a changing climate means. And what he's trying to say is that under a stationary climate, where it's been relatively stable, we obviously get extremes. It doesn't matter what parameter you pick, temperature, rainfall. Everything we use, we operate, has some sort of critical threshold over which it will fail. Whether it's a flood defence, whether it's heating in our buildings, whether it's health, there's some point at which things fail. And under a future climate, a changing climate, this metric, whatever it represents, temperature, is gradually increasing such that, and I'll press on to the next one, such that, this is our safety margin, our headroom, but in the future, if we don't move that threshold, if we don't do something about adaptation and resilience, our threshold and margin is being squeezed. And we're getting more risk of failure, more operational issues, more costs, more lives lost, more loss of profits. And this is the issue that our clients want to understand. They have access to this data, they're trying to understand this. I'm just going to finish on one last slide now, and that is that what we've begun to see is, and it's nothing to do with climate science as such, but there's a whole new, although climate science is actually adding to it, there's a whole new world out there of incredibly bright people who all they do is understand data. And we've been working with the US Government National Climatic Data Centre now for the last year, and we're doing a lot of work on market analysis for them in terms of their services. And when that work is finally published, we can share that with you, but fortunately I can't do that either at the moment. I'm very good at telling you great things, but not telling you what they are. But it's been interesting exploring with the NCDC, or NCEI as they are now. They don't know who uses their data. They don't know what they use it for. You can go onto their site and freely download everything, and you don't have to register whatsoever. So NCDC has no idea who's using their data, which means they have no idea what value it has, which means actually they have a problem convincing the federal government it has value, because they're not capturing this. So we've been trying to help them understand who's using it, particularly in the private sector. But what we noticed was people are beginning to use the data for other reasons, not what you might expect. And they're beginning to see there is value in these massive data sets applied to other data sets, which have this wonderful phrase, big data. And I believe we're going to see an emergent new business coming out of this. Now, this is a slight fudge, but in America, in the US, the biggest single grossing weather app on Apple is called Dark Sky. Has anybody come across it? I've got it on. You can actually get it in the UK as well now. Yeah, although it's not as good as the one in the US. What's really exciting about this was built by a group of data nerds, basically, who had no background knowledge in meteorology and climatology. They don't know anything about it at all. They stumbled across data sets sitting on the NCD website and realised, wow, what an enormous opportunity. What can we do with this? And they decided they would build a weather app that can provide you 15 minutes notice of when it's going to rain in your very locality. It has radar data, so on the screens actually you can see the storm coming in across your screen live. It gives you a forecast for the next 7 or 8 days. It tells you during the day which period, which time of the day it will rain, the percentages. The one in the UK is pretty accurate when I compare it to the Met Office's work. The interesting thing about it, it's more it's more live. It's changing constantly. In the US, as I say, you can be in your different blocks in New York, you will know in 15 minutes' time it will rain on your block compared to somebody else's. These people don't know anything about meteorology, but what they're doing is realising there's value in data for other means. And so I think there's some interesting things out there. So I'm going to finish there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. And I hope you saw the difference between the public and the private sector and some of the challenges and the way that they're looking at the problem, again, from the user side, and really understanding that problem and the way that the decisions are being made. Questions? Just one or two quick questions if we have some. And he cannot answer the question who the company was. I'll tell you that right now.
Thank you so much, John. I'm Guru Church from the Stockholm Environment Institute. Thank you so much for giving this presentation. I have a burning question to ask, and I hope this will. I don't expect you to answer it, but I hope all of us can answer it. There's a lot of talk about creating a market. I have a question. What kind of market do we want to create? Do we want to create a market so that companies like yours proliferate? Someone is a bridging organization. Do we want, so this would basically mean that we would create scientific information and support for bridging organizations, existing organizations? Or do we want to create a market where there is no demand yet, which is something different? Or do we want to support actors who are not capable of entering that market, poor municipalities in Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, which may not be able to afford your services? And those are three completely different services and different markets, actually. And haven't we understood what we mean with market creation at all so far?
Well, it is a difficult question because I don't think there's a straightforward answer. And it's actually the things you alluded to. It depends where in the world you are as well. I mean, one of the basic problems is access to the climate data is not free around the world. I mean, I work in developing countries where the data is not available to other ministries, never mind outside the government, without them paying for it, and they don't have the money, so they don't use it. And the classic case is Kenya, where the Ministry of Arid Lands collects the Met Services data, hands it over to the Meteorological Office, but then the Meteorological Office charges them for doing the analysis to hand it back, so they don't do it. So access to highly good quality, robust, reliable, high confidence level data is absolutely essential. Yes, I mean, my business wouldn't exist if we didn't know there was this wealth of data available. Although a lot of the time we're not actually using data, because what we're doing is explain to people how you do risk management. We're explaining to them the sorts of things they have to start taking into account. So a lot of it's at the government's institutional process issue as well, in addition to the very direct analysis level. Yeah, it is a difficult question. I don't know. I would do it. I'm CEO of a company. We see an incredibly exciting future out there around the world. I mean, we've got an office in India now, in USA, in the Caribbean. We're looking to expand elsewhere. We just see it as an enormous opportune. But we work very, very, very closely with Met Services, with universities around the world. We partner, we pull them into our contracts and subcontracts, so they're earning part of the fees as well.
I'm going to have to move us on. I'm sorry, John, you're with us today and tomorrow?
Yeah.
So could we please do ask questions? We really have to move on. We're falling. That's okay. There has been some, but I would really like to move us on, if I could. Thanks, John.
Okay.
I apologize. We do have to move on, though, because I really want to spend the time and give you the time for discussion. And if we sit here and I just need to move us on. And John will be with us both days. What I'd like to now ask is that as another player in this is to get, thank you, is to pull on, as asked Ralph Toomey, who is with Climate Kick, to talk about climate services from their perspective. And so I'll pass it on to you, Ralph. Thank you.
So I'm here on behalf of the Climate Kick to tell you a little bit about the things we've been doing and the sort of things we want to do. So first of all, what is the Climate Kick? Some of you may not be familiar with it. It's actually Europe's largest public-private innovation partnership and focused on climate change. It's mostly made up of business partners, 30% academic, 20% public and not-for-profit research organizations and other outfits. There are 13 European national regional centres. There's slight differences between the way we organise ourselves, but basically we're spread across Europe either in the nations or in European regions. Central offices in London. And funding comes from academic and private sector partners, but above all from an annual grant, which in itself causes problems, from the European Commission to the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, who actually have a whole lot of other kicks. There's an energy kick, a health kick, and all sorts of other kicks coming still. Surprised nobody has shown this diagram yet. This is tells you the ecosystem or the soup or whatever else you want to call it we're in, and there's lots of arrows, and we managed to put ourselves in color at the bottom right there. So there's a lot of people in this space. I think there's a lot of overlap. I'm personally a little bit concerned about how much overlap there is. I wish there was a bit less, because I think it could be done a bit more efficiently, but this is where we are. What we're actually doing there is we have a very complicated organization in Europe, which actually is chasing a really, really small market. This is an analysis done by EBI. This is back done in 2014, but I think some of the numbers, Harry, refer to 2012, I think, yeah? So they're all the numbers. So basically saying, well, okay, what is the climate market? Where's the money? Basically follow the money and you'll get a story. The money is not in adaptation. The money is in mitigation. All of the lines you see there about transportation, carbon, green buildings, energy storage, this is actual expenditure. And adaptation, they estimated, was globally of the order of 2 billion out of 1.7 trillion. So it's a very small market, and they included disaster resilience in that. And of course, that's the challenge. We think it's too small, and it's certainly tiny compared to the mitigation market. So I think that's well worth bearing in mind. Now then you say, okay, so there's 2 billion being spent globally according to this outfit. Well, where is it being spent? And basically I sort of broke it down into, I think they broke it down into 4 different categories. And the basic category where we start from, the climate information, which John has just pointed out, is by far the least important aspect in terms of where money is going. Vulnerability and assessment and monitoring and adaptation strategies, a little bit what a lot of the consultant companies do. That accounts for a large share of where the global flow of money is going. And then finally, it's the adaptation actions, which account for half the money. Now, we just heard a presentation this morning about an adaptation actions, for example, would include Copenhagen. And we just heard this morning that they're planning to spend $1 billion over the next 20 years. So this was done in 2012, so at that time, globally, there wasn't $1 billion spent, really, on action. So clearly, that part of the budget, that slice, is going to grow very rapidly. I doubt very much that the others are going to grow as rapidly as that one. Ultimately, that's the one that does have to grow. There has to be some actual action. And I think it's been short on action all over Europe. They actually expect an annual growth of the order of 10 to 20%. You can argue about that. It's on the agenda, which is why we're here, adaptation. So just, for example, recently there was the climate forum, the Davos meeting, and various other risk matrices people do, and failure to adapt to climate change is high on all of the possible risks that you might want to consider. And so people recognize it as an issue, but as I showed you, it's not backed up by actual spend of money. So basically, adaptation is a hard sell. It's a much smaller market than mitigation, but there is an opportunity there because it is small. It has huge potential. So if it's done properly, the growth potential is there. John illustrated that, just from his own company point of view, you can see that growth. There is huge potential. There's a complete mismatch about what needs to be done and what's actually going on. So the opportunity is actually there. So what does the climate kick do? So first of all, the first thing we did very early on is we recognized that we were not actually in climate services business. So why am I here? Because of course historically there's been a lot of debate about climate services, and historically it was, if you like, a push driven by the originators of the climate data, saying, well, we must create some value out of that. The climate kick clearly makes a line there. It says, well, we're not in the business of data generation, we're not in the business of Copernicus. We are in what we term the adaptation services. So it's the last 3 bits of the chain. We'll take the climate information as given, quality controlled or what have you, and then we try to create business models around that. So we term this term adaptation services. So that's what we talk about in the climate kick. We do not talk about climate services, we talk about adaptation services. And basically what we're looking for is innovative services which have a high impact. And we're looking to support and develop those services to increase, obviously, the same thing, adaptive capacity of societies and businesses. So first thing, we've identified a number of challenges. Climate information. There is a huge amount of information out there. Users don't ask for it, and actually if they do ask for it, they will often get horrified by how much there is and what to do with it. So there is probably a business opportunity around distilling it, about acting as the interloper between the data. So how to manage the information to the user. And then the sectorial services, which really means that specific sectors have specific needs, and businesses around that have to recognize that the sectors have specific needs, and if they want to cater for them, they have to develop sectorial services, and we heard Copernicus adopting this term as well. So I'm pleased to say we did all this 4 or 5 years ago, so we're obviously being supported by others who've done a similar analysis. So then we did a further analysis. We looked at our own partners, our own businesses in the KIC. We looked at all the academic outfits. We looked at the market sizes of where actually action was happening. We looked at where the competitive advantage is, and we basically identified 3 areas where we wanted to spend our money. One was insurance, and we'll talk about that later. Infrastructure, so energy and water utilities, and local authorities. Local authorities have actually so far been the biggest spender of money on climate services, and we think that will change, but so far they are the ones that have been spending the money, and they are spending the money, like we heard from the city of Copenhagen, because there's there's political drive to do that, and that's freeing up funds into this sector. So what sort of things are we doing? So these are acronyms, so I won't you bore them with. Just gives you an idea of the types of language we're using. So we have this idea of pathfinders, which are small market analysis type projects, trying to identify niches, opportunities, small, quick turnaround. We also have innovation projects. They're more classical, not research. We call them innovation because they are meant to produce products and services, not research papers, but they're nevertheless projects, multi-year, much bigger budgets. And we've got various acronyms, but then also we've got various challenges, the climate information, and then we cover various aspects, the utilities, the insurance sector, and local authorities. So we're defining a framework of adaptation we thought was important. We defined a value chain early on. We see that value chain seeing other people basically come to the similar conclusion of where the value chain is and where things are. We've merged from climate service to adaptation services. We focus downstream, and we think the KIC is in a good position. And I've lost the bottom of that slide there. And we also play a role within the other European actors and hope to participate in their strategy. So how do we generate projects? This is really important to us. So this is the co-definition or co-creation. So just to give you an idea, we identified utility energy was an important thing, important opportunity, for creating new projects. So basically we created a workshop. We invited the key participants in the KIC who we thought might be interested. We actually strategically moved to a different part where we had previous energy projects in France. We wanted to go to Germany, so we went to Germany to get some local actors there because we know business is hard to get. If you just send invitations, people don't come. You have to make it easy for them. You have to make incentives. It takes time. So so we have experience in that. Anyway, we had this workshop, we brainstormed ideas around innovation projects and ultimately came to a proposal to the KIC, which was then internally evaluated with external reviewers, and finally became a project which is just starting. So that's a sort of process under which we go, and it's business-led, not academic-led. Other things we get involved in is training. We think there's business development opportunities, professional development opportunities. So this is an example of a short course that was run in Holland, and we try to link the innovation projects. We try to bring students in, academics in, small businesses, but it's all very much based on often based on the local strength and bringing in local actors. So I think there's another activity similar to this, for example, in Italy this year, where there was a strong appetite to do something similar. So there's an education and training element as well to what we do. Our flagship, or one of our successful innovation project was around insurance, and particularly around catastrophe modelling. It's Oasis is the name of the project. And so what I put on the left here is how we measure that it's successful. So we have a basic way in which we define success, and the very first thing you'll see there, it's attracted money. That's the first thing, which is a powerful signal that we're doing something right. So that's attracted capital investment from an insurance company. It's created other companies, other spin-out companies, which are also now sustaining themselves. There's sort of recognition, so there's recognition from industry that this is a good thing, so it's won 2 industry awards. There's interest from other international bodies. It got a mention in the recent Climate Service Roadmap mention, and it can also link into other KICs. So that's how we measure how something would work. This is a very specific project. The reason it's worked, it was completely demand-driven. It was basically the sector come to, if you like, a critical point where there was a need for innovation in a specific space in catastrophe modelling, and there was a demand, and we managed to fill the demand and continue to fill that demand. So it wasn't, if you like, the academics saying we've got something clever. It was actually us being able to identify in an industry sector there was need and demand for change. And so now this organization actually includes at least, growing, 44 members of the insurance sector, all the world's leading, or many of the world's leading insurance, reinsurance and brokers are part of this, and it's one of our great success stories. So where do we see the adaptation landscape? We think that the KIC could play a role in helping the other European institutions which are also tackling with it. So we were on the expert panel for the roadmap. Oasis was mentioned, like I said. We're also supporting the Climate Support Action proposal. We hope to work with Eranet. We're trying to explore ways of combining with people, making our money go further in this space. So finally, the vision for the KIC is to enable enable us to bring to market the most innovative and high-impact adaptation services addressing the climate challenge. And we are cross-European, and we are at the moment seen as a leader for innovation. Maybe not because we do it very well, but actually we were set up 3 or 4 years ago, back in the days when Framework 7 was very much about research, and there was no other innovation activity, and that's why maybe we have a little bit of a head start, but clearly a lot of other people now are mandated to use taxpayers' money to drive innovation. We just have a little bit of a head start, but we hope to share that with anybody else that's interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolf. Do we have time for a couple questions? Yes, please. Just a sec.
Hi. I'm curious to know if you have any visibility of which European markets are likely to be the biggest markets in the next 10 or 20 years. And my second question is about who do you think are going to be the big spenders in the next 10, 20 years?
So like I said, we buy reports from people, consultants that have done analysis. We also looked at public information, and Harry will correct me, but I think what we basically looked at was, where the adaptation action is, where the total spend is going to be largest. So infrastructure, came out the highest spend, and then that drives the need for services for the actual spend. And that is nothing unique about Europe in that case. So infrastructure could include utilities, for example, and things like that. So that's the big. I can't remember this. Was the second part of your question? Oh, well, I think there's clearly there's a north-south split in terms of demand, capability, and so forth. So I see the money being spent in the north.
One more question?
Not the need necessarily, but
this gentleman here asked last time, and I had to pass on, so I'll pass it.
I'll just keep on. I'll just ask you. You just said there is a north-south split, and the money is going to be spent in the north.
Probably.
Why? Is it only because there is less money in the south? Is it because the problem is less important in the south, or is it because the problem is perceived as less important in the south, or is it just because the south is unable to plan and to program?
So,
I come from Italy.
Yes, sure. Now, just let me split it in two parts. Right. So first of all, the real spend so far has been by the public sector in terms of demanding climate services. We just heard a very good example this morning from the city of Copenhagen, and it's classic. It is not, and therefore if you like, there is a cultural willingness, there's a political will, and there are resources to spend on climate services. And that's where I see that bit. I think in terms of the public sector, that's where that comes. If you think about the private sector, if you think about companies, big companies can be in the south as well as in the north. So if the big companies are persuaded about the business model for spending money on climate services, they will spend it in the south as well as in the north. So on that basis, I'm not making a north-south distinction. I'm just making a distinction in terms of the appetite for the public sector to spend money on adaptation. This is our perception.
Thank you very much, Ralph. You're around today and tomorrow?
I'm around today and tomorrow.
So lots of opportunities to talk to him, particularly in the brokerage sections and activities, et cetera. Thank you. Okay. One of the things that we wanted to do here was we've tried to give you in these presentations, and I apologize that it's a lot of presentations, but we wanted to give you that feeling of what the environment was, what the environment wanted to do, what the environment within which we see this climate services operating. And the questions that you were asking, I think, were very helpful in starting to look at that. For example, the last question that you talked about is very much in the roadmap. How do we enhance the market, if we want to use a simple term, across Europe? That's vital to that, and that's similar to your question, is how do we do that? How do we grow it so that it's not just the sectors that are where there's a lot of money, but the sectors where it's critical and decisions required to do it? How do we grow that market and grow the capability of using this? And the reason that we wanted to do that is because the European Commission saw this as vital to improving decision making. That's what it wanted to do. But it also was because it wanted to see Europe as number one in this area, as a leading in this whole area of climate services. So it's the two concepts that they're trying to look at, because it saw this as being able to make decisions. If we could make decisions that are informed, we will be a much more sustainable Europe. And we had to do that across all of Europe. We can't just do it in 5 or 6 countries. We have to do it across Europe. So it was trying to look at that. So these are some of the challenges that were reflected in the roadmap. This brokerage session we thought would be informed, it's been more than just myself and Dagmar that have been doing this, and I like some of the people from Module 2 to stand up just so that I can introduce them. Hans? So yes, please do stand up. Please do. Yes. So these are some of the other people that were involved. And Jeanette, do you just want to introduce yourself very quickly?
Jeanette Westman from KMI, Dutch Meteorological Institute, and working for the last 10 years on the interaction between research and the users.
Yes. Hans? Very much so. Yeah. Thank you. I wanted to do that because now we're going to start into really understanding and focusing on and giving you an opportunity to direct that. One of the things we've done, we've given you a picture of the broad research and innovation environment which we're working in. We then looked at it, the role of private and the public sector and looking at that. But one of the aspects that we thought in the JPI climate that it would be useful for you to understand is to get some of the issues that are coming out in each of the in the sectors. We thought that'd be useful and give you a bit of a sector focus. And for those of you that are aware, there are a number of JPIs that are focused on different sectors. And we thought just give you a very quick some of the challenges that the different JPIs saw that were related to climate services. And we've asked a couple of them to come, and I think I've got everybody here that said they were going to be here. And I'll start with Florence, is it? Florence, do you want to come up and just give a quick... Florence is with... I just can't find the mouse. It's not moving for me. There it is, right?
Yeah. No, it's Facce.
That's the Facce one. It's all right. I didn't think that was the right one. My glasses are not working quite as well as they should be. There. This one right there. Oceans. Sorry about that. I've got to clean my glasses. Anyways, Florence is going to give a talk and give you a perspective from the JPI Oceans on what they were about.
Yes, thank you. So, a quick reminder about what is the joint programming process, even though we have a number of joint programming initiatives here in the room. So that's a strategic process to provide a long-term integrated approach to marine and maritime research for JPI Oceans at least. And it's an initiative which is led by member states. And it's open to all interested countries involved in marine and maritime research. At the moment, we have 20 countries involved, which are the key European and associated countries who are funding marine and maritime research. The global objective is to increase and improve the cross-border collaboration for member states' publicly funded research programs. The tools which we'll use to fund research, collaborative projects, and so on, are open to all types of tools from national and regional programs, intergovernmental research organizations, and collaborative schemes, research infrastructures, the shared use of research infrastructures, mobility schemes, and even European Union schemes like Eranet Co-Fund and others. We have, so member countries have defined 10 strategic areas which are part of a strategic research and innovation agenda. It means that the 20 members of JPI Oceans are committed to address together those 10 topics. So among those 10 topics, I've highlighted the 3 topics, or I should say strategic areas, which are of interest for climate services. So it's strategic area number 6, observing, modeling, and predicting oceans, state and processes. Strategic areas number 7, climate change impact on physical and biological ocean processes. And number 8, effects of ocean acidification. We have also identified 3 cross-cutting initiatives: infrastructures, shared use and management, science policy, and human capacity building. I will come back to these specific cross-cutting initiatives in my presentation. So what is needed regarding the observation of oceans is to provide long-term observations to better understand the interactions between marine environment, climate change, human activities. to give a quick example of the type of activities that it may involve, this is, for example, to on the long term to develop a long-term plans for the development of observing technologies we need to observe the oceans, cost-efficient technologies, supporting actions to improve and foster access to high-performance computing facilities, connect the European Ocean Observing System with its international counterpart, like GOOS, which was mentioned earlier, the Global Ocean Observing System. All this is also, of course, connected to services like Copernicus mentioned earlier, which is the satellites part of the European Ocean Observing System. And as I said earlier, JPI Oceans is a coordinating body, which means it needs to be connected to different integrating organizations, especially in the field of infrastructures. Strategic Area 7 on climate change impact on physical and biological ocean processes. The objective here is to respond to the need for long-term monitoring and, more importantly, to better understand the processes and feedback mechanism between ocean and atmospheric systems. I've highlighted under this specific topic 2 actions which are already in discussion in JPI Oceans. Research on impacts of climate change on ocean circulation, and the idea of establishing a long-term monitoring program to follow up changes in the thermocline circulation. So those 2 very specific topics are already in discussions by member countries. I am specifying this because the agenda is an agreement for member states to address those issues, but we are also for the next 2 years already discussing concrete actions to be launched. The effect of ocean acidification is also connected to the understanding of the Earth systems and the climate systems. The objective and the need identified is to understand the effects of ocean acidification, which also require the alignment of research. This topic, the key element for all these topics is that all these types of research can't be conducted by one single member state. That's why member countries have identified those broad topics. Under this topic, we also have 3 activities which are which are in preparation to be launched in the next 2 years. In relation to the research concerning the combined effects of warming and acidification in marine ecosystems, research regarding knowledge on the impact of acidification and warming on vulnerable deep sea habitats and their biodiversity, and establishing a sustainable pan-European network to ensure long-term approach to deal with the effects of acidification. While I'm talking about those specific actions which will be launched in the next 2 years, I should also highlight that the management board of JPI Oceans want to make sure that users and producers are involved from the launch of joint actions. We also have 2 cross-cutting initiatives in the context of marine services. One need which were identified is to set up a science policy interface to make sure that quality scientific information is needed to support evidence-based policy decisions. and also in the field of infrastructures, the need to set up a platform for high-level political dialogue to develop common strategies in this area was identified. So these are the relevant strategic areas identified by JP Oceans.
Thank you very much, Paula. It was quite interesting because I could remember when we brought out a new set of projections in the UK, and someone from the marine community came to us and really wanted to use these, and they were very excited. And then they came back, we don't really understand our thresholds or anything, what the impacts that's going on in the ocean. We thought this would tell us that. And so they really had to go back and understand this, and that's some of the points that you were bringing up. And some of the points on the rationale, I think, were very critical to understanding how this information can be used. That was very useful. Thank you. Christine, you're going to talk to us about FATCA.